The graphs we've done so far have a regular number integer, so now let's take a look at one that has a fraction. So even though it has a fraction, that's okay. We're still going to work with this one before we start doing the graphs. We're going to work with this and put it into a little bit more familiar form first. So what I want to do with that is, instead of the 1/3, that's 1 over 3 to the first power. What I can also do with that is write it as a 3 to the negative 1 power. That actually means the same thing. So I have 3 raised to the negative 1 inside there, which is the same as 1/3. And now I have a power raised to another power. So I'm going to multiply the exponents. So I'm actually just going to leave it in this format. I could go ahead and multiply that through, but instead I'm just going to put the negative out front. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because if you see a negative in the exponent position, it ends up being a flip over the vertical axis. So I'm purposely leaving it in that form, so that way we'll know how to deal with that later. So now let's go ahead and graph this one. Now we looked at this graph before, the base graph y equals 3 to the x. Again, the pattern for that, it just goes up like this. It goes through the point 0, 1 right there. So that would be your base graph that we're beginning with for this one. Okay, now next, we want to deal with the exponent part first before we deal with this one on the end. Let's do the x minus 3. So x minus 3, we're just going to do y equals 3 to the x minus 3. And that means you're going to move the graph 3 places this time to the right. It's always opposite sign of this, so negative, we're instead moving the positive direction. This point 0, 1, that's going to move 3 places over to the right. So it was here at 0, we just move that one over 3 places, so now the graph is going to be right there. Everything else is going to look exactly the same, so it's still going to follow this and go like that. So the general shape is the same. Next, let's take care of the negative that's in the exponent position. So what I mentioned with the negative is the whole graph does this. It flips. Now, the most common mistake I see people making is they use the axis here as a pivot point and then having it be over on this side. That's not what you're going to do. The pivot point is actually this one right here. So your graph is actually going to have the same point. It's still going to go through, so when I make this one here, it's still going to go through 3, 1. So the one that we're doing right now is 3 to negative x minus 3, applying the negative there. So the dot, that's still going to remain in the same spot. So instead of the graph going up like this, instead the graph is going to go down and look something like this. It's flipped over the vertical axis, but the axis itself happens to go through this value here of 3. So we flip it and it's going to do this. It's not going to end up over here on the other side. So we're just flipping it there and it goes to that same point 3, 1. The last one we're going to do is our actual equation. We have x minus 3 and then minus 1. So y equals 3 to that minus 1, or plus 1. So plus 1, you're going to raise the whole graph up 1 unit. So right here, it did have a horizontal asymptote at 0, and we're shifting it up 1. Also, if we do the horizontal asymptote, we know it's always going to be equal to this number after the exponent. That's how you find the horizontal asymptote. So I know that's going to be y equals 1, which means that I got to put a dotted line over here at 1. Now this point, that moves up 1 as well, so it's going to be at 3, 2, and so this point got moved up to this one here. When I draw my line, it's going to follow the horizontal asymptote, and then it'll go up and hit that point. Actually, it's going the wrong direction. Sorry, it's going to be going the same direction as that because we're not flipping anything. So the graph is now going to do that. So we have it. We started here. We moved it 3 places over to the right. We flipped it over the vertical axis, and then we shift the whole thing up 1 unit. And so this is going to be your final answer.